Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chain in Focus featuring Linea. Chain in Focus is a series where we welcome the blockchain foundations behind chains with which DIA has partnered and deployed to share with us information about their chain, their vision, and to explore the significance of DIA's integration into their ecosystem. We see across the blockchain and cryptocurrency landscape a multitude of L1 and L2 chains launching, and at DIA as a cross-chain Oracle provider, it is of vital importance to be up to speed, following industry trends, and integrating with as many of these promising chains as possible. And we also intend for these series to be educational, interesting, and engaging for all of the extended DIA community and beyond. So with that said, sit tight and get comfortable as we dive into Chain in Focus and welcome a Layer 2 ZK EVM blockchain, which has been developed by ConsenSys and is unlocking a new level of user experience and scalability for Ethereum, which is Linea. And so at this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage Emanuele, who is a growth manager at Linea, and Declan Fox, who holds the position of product lead at Linea. Emanuele, Declan, how are you guys doing?
Hey, thanks for the invite, guys. Super happy to be
Awesome.
here. Emanuele here.
GM. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting
Thank
us.
you guys so much for joining. And it's also a special episode today because we also have Paul Claudius, who's the co-founder and head of BD at DIA. Paul, how are you? You there?
I'm really well, quite excited here, and much looking forward to discuss with Emmanuel and Declan Fox, what's up with Linea and how we can support on the DIA side. And thanks, Dylan, for hosting this here.
Awesome. My pleasure. Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into this Thanksgiving special episode today with everybody.
Happy
Happy Thanksgiving
Thanksgiving.
to everybody out there who's celebrating today. And so let's dive right in. You know, we always like to start by getting to know our speakers a little bit, giving our people in the audience a little bit of a background on who we're hearing from today. So if you guys don't mind, let's just start things up with a quick round of introductions. Um, Emmanuel, how about we start with you before we dive into Linea? Can you share with us a little bit of your background and history or work experience within the crypto industry?
Hey, for sure, not a problem. I've been working in crypto for a while. Took care. I actually worked in a couple of startups before going into the more corporate world, where we bootstrapped inside a big four company, a crypto specific center. Before joining ConsenSys just a bit over 2 years ago, where I was doing the product manager before, but always been focused on growth, honestly. I've seen Linea basically uh, being created from the beginning in ConsenSys, and Declan will also be able to, deep dive even more about this, about our story as well. Of ConsenSys, ZK EVM, and Linea. And right now I'm only focusing on actually growing the network on two main metrics, let's say the user side, and of course, probably also the most important one, or at least even a dependency on the user side, is the partner side. Like partners like, for example, DIA, where we are today. And yeah, so basically, this is what I do the whole day. I read a lot of Telegram messages every day.
Love it. Excellent. And I think we have a good contrast of viewpoints here because I'm pretty sure Declan's on the other side of the organization with the product in terms of product development. So, Declan, can we get a little background from you if you don't mind and hear from your work experience?
Yeah, sure. Love to. So, before joining ConsenSys, I was sort of deep in the Web3 space, but mostly on building applications. So, built a bunch of applications. Actually, was doing stuff around real world assets. So, tokenizing real world assets and deploying them on chain, but before they were, the new thing. And then joined ConsenSys just over 2 years ago to kind of lead the ConsenSys rollups team, which was sort of like the precursor to what eventually became, the Linea sort of team and sort of organization to help bootstrap this new network we're launching. So, yeah, my role in this team is to lead the product, and that kind of broadly tends itself to, what should we be building next? Why should we be building it? How can we help our users? How can we help the people building on Linea be more successful? So I guess I kind of spend the time doing a bunch of different things. It's like a pretty diverse role. even some BD sometimes. But yeah, ultimately, like spending time with our partners, with the people using Linea day in, day out, and then just like working with our amazing engineering and research team to think of like new solutions, new technologies and initiatives that can help them be successful.
Excellent. Great to hear from you, Declan. Thank you for that background. Yeah, really great to have you both here to share your insights on both the partner side and the product side. And last but not least, we have Paul. Paul, many of you, of course, many in the audience are, of course, familiar with you. But if you don't mind, can you just give us a bit of a refresher on your background and how you got into DIA?
Yeah, sure. Love to. So my background lies in management finance, actually. So spent most of my career in a startup environment prior to being like in investment banking, private equity, like just after university. And I think my first touch point with blockchain was like 2012, but just like from the outside, not really understanding what was happening. And it took me quite some time to understand what this architecture actually can provide as a foundation. And I really felt this is something transformational. So without really like knowing what to do, I decided 2017 I'm going to stop and phase out of my startup and move into crypto. And kind of like the initial vision and first thought when we founded DIA was, okay, data is pretty scarce in its accessibility and the format it is being provided. And oracles back then and even today to a large extent, we felt didn't cater well to an ecosystem where we, and this was like 2018, so I think there was still discussion, will we have just like one big blockchain or will there be many and how will they be connected? We always felt, I think we'll have a multitude of different ecosystems and they will need to be connected one way or the other. This really was kind of the foundational thesis for DIA. If we have all these ecosystems, we need to be able to provide each and every ecosystem with very specific price feeds and not have just a high-level macro perspective which is provided by, I'd say, most of our peers. So this has been the driving force. I think for a couple of years, this was completely irrelevant. So a bit product market fit came luckily a bit later, but I think we're very much convinced every day more that this is providing a cutting edge in the Oracle space and caters to a multitude of especially now with the emergence of dApp chains, rollups, and so on, and the fragmentation of the ecosystem. So what's my role at DIA? I'm running with Dylan, our moderator here today, business development. And so I have kind of the great opportunity to be able to speak with a bunch of interesting projects using our oracles as well as infrastructure, L1s and L2s, where we integrate. So we can only be as good as basically the underlying stack and the opportunity it delivers to dApps, and then understanding what is really key and important to them. So that's something I very much enjoy doing every day, and super cool here to discuss this all with you guys.
Yeah, it's really great to hear that. And I'm really interested to get into your perspective also later in the conversation, Paul, about really how DIA will uniquely foster growth and innovation within the Linea ecosystem. As you mentioned, having this very granular look at providing price feeds within an ecosystem. So, I discuss these things, but I think it's going to be great to hear it from your perspective. That said, now that we have introductions out of the way, let's dive into a little bit more background on Linea itself. So most of you who are listening here, or those of you who are native to Web3, are likely very well acquainted with ConsenSys products offerings, from MetaMask to Infura. Declan, can you give us some background on how this idea to launch a layer 2 ZK EVM came to life? Since when has the ConsenSys team been building Linea, and when did this vision all begin?
Yeah, I would love to. So I think to understand why we decided to bootstrap this new network, Linea, you kind of have to start at like the vision, right? And our vision at ConsenSys is we want to help bring about this new objective trust infrastructure to the world, right? A way in which everyone anywhere has the same opportunities, without any sort of intermediaries taxing them or censoring them, to maintain sovereignty over your assets and your identity and your privacy for, decades, centuries to come. Okay, that's the kind of world we want to build because we think that's the world that we would like to live in. And so to kind of help us get there, we're always thinking about what is the right path? Like, what do we need to do in order to achieve that? And so, we've been very committed to the genesis of Ethereum itself. We believe Ethereum is the most credibly neutral, blockchain layer in the whole of Web3, in the whole of crypto. But it became very apparent in 2018, after that bull run, that Ethereum wouldn't scale by itself. And so we kind of set about with the rest of the community to figure out, scaling solutions. And we went through various different scaling solutions back then, like Plasma, state channels, and we kind of settled on rollups. Okay, so then rollups are great. The different types of ways of doing rollups, optimistic and ZK. We really felt that ZK was the best way and the only way that we should be, thinking about scaling solutions long term. And then we also acknowledged that, we have these EVM sort of network effects, this like infrastructure, these tools, these standards that would just be a shame to like throw away and start from scratch. And so we just set out on this like really ambitious goal from a research perspective. Back in, I think 2019 was like the first time our researchers got together and started working on this hard problem of like building a ZK EVM. Like we didn't even call it a ZK EVM back then, but like that's what it became to be. And not just like any sort of, like when we say ZK EVM, we mean actually the same EVM bytecode, right? Like maintaining those infrastructural network effects of all the tools and the apps and the standards that we have on Ethereum today, just moving that to a more scalable layer. So we set off on that journey in 2019. It took some time to get there. But, we sort of worked really hard on coming up with like an innovative prover solution, building everything in-house. And then it was only in last year that we got to a place where like, okay, this is ready to be tested in the real world, like in production. And so, who better to sort of battle test this thing than ourselves? Like, if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? So that's where the vision of Linea in actual, bootstrapping the network came to fruition. And we kind of moved very quickly from like, oh, we've done the research to let's actually productize this and build the network itself. And so I think from finishing up our papers at the end of last year, we ended up launching the first version of the testnet in January the 9th this year, 2023. So I think some people are always like, oh, I was surprised to hear about, Linea or ConsenSys doing a ZK EVM, because we weren't really focused on like, going on Twitter and laughing about things to come. We were just kind of heads down doing what we can do to help us get to our vision as a community, as an ecosystem. And that was why we were able to sort of move very quickly from that initial testnet on January the 9th to public mainnet back in July. Like it took us roughly 6 months to get there. And Linea today, it's been going very smoothly on mainnet since July. ZK proof settling every single batch, everything's working, everything's going well. So yeah, that's the sort of like chronology, I guess, of the initial idea of like how we can scale Ethereum to actually researching the ZK EVM, building it out, and now we're in production, and the ecosystem, Dia's help as well, is just really thriving.
I really appreciate that background that you gave there, and I actually want to stay here on this topic with you really quick, Declan, and dive a little bit deeper. You provided some outline into, or some outlook on the different types of architectures, right, from optimistic to ZK EVM, and how some of the benefits, you've already provided some insights into the benefits of ZK EVM. When we look at really where this industry is right now, it seems like there's this explosion of Ethereum rollups, right? When you look at L2 Beat, it shows that there's currently 22 active rollups and 16 upcoming rollups in the near future. So can we stay on this topic with you really quick, Declan? And can you give us a little bit more background into really what the ZK EVM architecture entails and how this is similar or dissimilar to other popular rollup architectures?
Yeah, definitely. So, like you said, we see on things like L2B, all these different roll-up ecosystems, and we're going to see a lot more in the next few months, years. But there really is only like a handful of actual like underlying frameworks that these ecosystems are using. So people like Linea, we put everything in-house, everything's going to be open, and then people can use that to then spin up their own ecosystem, which is why you'll see a lot more. So So really the kind of question is like, what is the difference between these underlying frameworks, right? You have a handful to choose from. What's the difference? And so, with Linea is a bytecode compatible ZK EVM. Okay, and I'll break that down because it can sound like sort of technical nonsense to a lot of people. But like ultimately, why ZK versus optimistic? ZK simply is just cryptographic security, whereas optimistic is crypto-economic security. Okay, so do you want to rely on maths and cryptography, or do you want to rely on like game theory and economics? Okay, so that's a decision that a user ultimately makes. And that's why we believe that ZK is going to be more secure. And if we're going to build a future internet of value and a global trust infrastructure, then it should be based on the most sort of secure fundamental primitives we can, which is why we think ZK is great. And then EVM just means, like, from a developer's perspective, it really just looks and feels like Ethereum. I sometimes describe Linea as feeling like home for developers because it really is exactly the same. There's no gotchas, there's no nuances. Like when we say it's EVM, it really is exactly the same. So that's the sort of ZK EVM. And then in terms of how that compares to some other ZK EVM frameworks you might see, it all comes down to that underlying nuance of like how compatible you are with the sort of Ethereum specification. And that's when it gets a little bit nuanced and technical, but there are differences. And ultimately it's developers who feel those differences. It's middleware and integrations that also feel those differences, because when they're trying to like not only just integrate with those ecosystems, but then maintain their applications and advance them to be even better, like you don't want to have to handle differences. So that's the real key benefit and value proposition of Linea. It's just exactly the same as Ethereum. It's using ZK proofs, and then because we spent, like I mentioned, those 5 long hard years in the research, in the in the sweaty rooms, looking at the cryptography, looking at the math to come up with such a great prover solution, that means that over time we're going to be able to sort of generate zero knowledge proofs and verify them so cheaply that you won't even really know in terms of the cost that you're using a ZK rollup. So that's going to help us get to that vision of like almost feeling like we're using Ethereum, but everything's just going to be cheap, it's going to be fast, it's going to be infinitely better than the previous years we've seen in this industry.
Thanks for that background, Declan. I think that highlighting the difference between ZK, EVM, and sort of the optimistic architecture approach as cryptographic security versus crypto economic security is really a strong and really a great point and a great way to look at it. And really appreciate how you highlighted Linea's Ethereum equivalent architecture, in sort of a comparison to an EVM compatible architecture, right? And mentioning that it is basically like home, as you said. You're able to deploy with the exact same code, right? The exact same dApp architecture with no adjustments needed. So really interesting to highlight the Ethereum equivalent aspect there. Let's talk about one thing which is omnipresent when launching any layer 1 or layer 2, which is decentralization. I think that Linea has taken an interesting approach towards this phased approach towards progressive decentralization. Maybe Declan, this might be one more question on the product side for you, but can you give our audience some insight into Linea's roadmap towards decentralization and where you guys are at now within that progress, and sort of how is Linea paving the way for a decentralized and resilient blockchain ecosystem?
Yeah, this is a great question. Decentralization is a means to an end. Okay, that end, like I mentioned, is to create this infrastructure, this public good, that is completely censorship resistant, it's permissionless, it's trustless. It gives each individual here on this call and others the right to have sovereignty over their identity, their assets forever. Okay, and decentralization is just the best way we have to essentially achieve that goal. Now, why do we want to do this in a progressive way? Because we also deeply care about the security of the system and users who are, putting their assets and their money into the system, who are exploring it. Like that is something that we absolutely must have. I always describe security as, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for humans, you sort of go back to school, like you have at the bottom of the pyramid, like water, food, shelter. That's security to a rollup. Like without that, the whole pyramid comes crashing down. So we just want to make sure that as we're sort of going through this initial bootstrapping phase and we're maturing these systems, that security is always at the forefront of our mind and our users. And then eventually, things will be at a stage where they can be sufficiently decentralized, and permissionless and resilient and everything. And they're sort of, the security is baked into it at such a fundamental level, that these systems can stand up for, the rest of time. Right. So we don't want to rush anything too fast because we're thinking long term. We're thinking bigger picture. 100 years time, when I'm no longer on this planet, unless we do some sort of life extension, I want to see like Linea still knocking about with the same sort of level of security and trust that people can use. And so, concretely, where are we on that journey today? We're actually making pretty good progress. Like everything, or not everything, but like most of the parts of Linea are completely open source, completely transparent. Everything, including the prover circuits, will be open source when they're ready. And then it's a case of, okay, we have the components that make up a rollup, which is, you can think of the sequencer, so the part that actually builds the blocks, and then the prover, which is this part that generates zero knowledge proofs to verify the computation. These parts need to be decentralized, okay? And that's just because we want to provide certain guarantees around real-time censorship resistance. The reason that we can do it in a sort of progressive way is because rollups fundamentally rely on the underlying Ethereum base layer for their security. So we already have a very, very good level of decentralization baked in and liveness guarantees, because each transaction that you do on Linea, which ends up getting rolled up into a batch, those batches get compressed and published to Ethereum itself. Okay, so you already know as a user that that data is there. That will be able to be used by you to withdraw your assets. As long as Ethereum validators are secure, which, to be honest, if they weren't, then that's a very big problem for everyone, for the entire space. And as long as you trust like Ethereum validators, then you're already in a good place with systems like Linea. So yeah, that's where we are. We're about halfway through our journey. We know there's more to do. An interesting thing about Linea, I want to make sure, I think people will be interested to know, is that our final vision in terms of decentralization for Linea actually has what's called a multi-prover. Okay, and this is quite unique. So I really want to, detail it a bit. So what will happen on Linea is that each transaction, which gets rolled up into what we call a batch, that will be proven by multiple different implementations of a ZK EVM prover. Okay, so you can imagine like 3 provers generating a proof. Each one is slightly different. And then as long as you have, let's say, 2 out of 3 proofs that are sound, then the rollup will still continue to function. And it's this like extra level of resiliency and security that makes us as secure as Ethereum. And like a good analogy is that on Ethereum today, people may or may not know this, but we have multiple different execution clients. Right, this is the diversity that gives Ethereum so much power. It's the reason that the merge was so successful. And we're going to implement that exact same philosophy on layer 2, on Linea itself. So yeah, the final vision for Linea gives you the same trust assumptions as Ethereum itself. Again, sort of circling back to the vision I stated at the beginning, scaling an objective trust infrastructure that allows anyone to permissionlessly retrieve and have sovereignty over their assets forever.
That's really great context into this approach towards decentralization that you guys are taking. I'm really excited to see how this evolves over the years. And I think we all value this, right? As you mentioned, this is sort of like the base level of needs here on Maslow's hierarchy. I love that reference in terms of just having this confidence in the underlying settlement layer, or which would be Ethereum in this case, but in terms of where you're actually executing the transaction on Linea. Really great to hear that background on decentralization. So thanks for hopping in there, Declan, on that one. I want to transition and bring Emanuel on stage. I know you're already on here, Emanuel, but I want to hear from you a bit. You mentioned how your role is really focused on the user side and the partner side. And while we can get into product and the unique advantages of Linea's approach for quite some time here, we also need to focus on the success that Linea has achieved in terms of its transition from testnet to mainnet. The chain saw a record of on-chain activity with 2.7 million transactions $26 million worth of tokens being bridged. And this has made it the fastest growing ZK EVM. And so on top of all of these technical attributes, we are in this world of ever-growing layer 1 and layer 2 blockchain ecosystems. Emanuel, can you give some perspective on some of the measures outside of product that Linea has taken to distinguish itself so well? Sorry, I see that Emanuel got kicked off stage there, so let's see if we can get him back on here.
Hey,
Hey,
you should be
Emanuel.
here too. You should be able to hear me now, right?
Yes,
Perfect.
perfectly.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I don't know what happens with the X space sometimes. I just randomly get kicked out of the space. But anyways, Elon Musk must hate me for some reasons. Anyways, I perfectly got your question. So let me deep dive a bit on the growth approach that we are trying to have. Yes, you perfectly said it. I mean, we actually have bigger numbers to share, given that we, at the moment, we are running a DeFi Voyage is part of the overall growth program that we call the Voyage XP program, which is a program that we have put up in place and is basically the hat for many of the initiatives or the growth initiatives that we are carrying on as Linea, basically. So, as I was telling you, indeed, we are employing different tactics. Let's start from the partner side. I mean, we were able to get over 250 partners in the first months of being in mainnet. I would say because we are really understanding from the day one that our own success depends on the success of our partners in a direct way. Meaning that the overall idea of Linea is to not have a ghost town where you just have, dApps that deploy your Linea and then leave the chain. What we're trying to do, and we're also trying to avoid as well on purpose those grand centers that you see more and more. So basically, developers and teams that just deploy on a chain and then let their project die on the chain if things don't go well. So we're trying to establish long-term relationships with all the partners that we are working with. DIA is definitely one of them. So we are super happy to give visibility to our partners that are participating to the ecosystem. It's definitely something that we believe it's very important on the cross collaboration side between the network and the dApps. The network should always be supportive to dApps that live on top of it, because it's the only thing that is actually going to be able to attract users. In this case, infra providers and Oracle providers like DIA, for example, are especially important because they are a big piece of the overall value chain of a network like Linea. So technology is definitely the biggest point, also the point on which we're putting a lot of effort on, but ecosystem is where the key is. So definitely on the partner side, as I was telling you, we're doing a lot of things. I would now focus on the user side, so transactions, TVL, etc., etc. So we are putting all our programs under this Voyage XP program, which is basically XP points, Linea XP points, that for us are a way to understand what is the contribution to the network that each member is giving. So it becomes a very important matrix, basically, to understand who is contributing and in what way to the network. Under this program, there are several initiatives in real life events. So for anybody that was in Istanbul for Dev Connect, was able to collect some XPs just by participating to our events, because of course the contribution to the network in that case was to participate to a Linea event. Not only we have several activations such as entertainment festivals, even online help, for example on Discord on what we call the Linea Champions, is something that we are trying to reward with XP points. But especially on the usage side, we are doing, as I was telling you, several type of activations. In this exact moment, together with Interact, we are running the DeFi Voyage, which is basically a full journey of the DeFi value chain for all the users, starting from, for example, bridging, going to swapping, yield farming, liquidity providing, anything that can be done on a DeFi dApp on Linea will be touched inside this program, which is meant to be an educational and fun program for the users, basically. It's actually helping us a lot to bootstrap liquidity, at least on the TVL side. As you can see on N2Bit, Linea has done pretty big advancements on the TVL side, also thanks to the voyage, where our partners were involved. So it's a I would say it's a collaborative approach for which the utmost objective is making our users happy by using a ZK rollup, which mimics Ethereum on the overall experience, and this aligns perfectly also, with the closeness that we have to the MetaMask team. And secondly, of course, to our partners, to give them spotlights, to make them grow together with us. So yeah, sorry, I think I already talked too much about this, but yeah, basically this is all that we're putting in place at this moment of time to grow the network and the ecosystem more and more.
There's no need to be sorry at all, Emanuele. I think that this point can't be drilled in enough. I think it's really great that we heard from Declan so much to begin on all the unique things you guys are building, or all the unique aspects on the product side. And then to hear from you in terms of all these different initiatives and all the efforts you are placing in both dApps and users, right? Development and users. It shows how multi-pronged the need for this approach really is. So I want to say congratulations on the success with 250 partners in the first months of mainnet. And really interesting perspective that you brought up in terms of how the problem is not just gaining the partners or gaining the dApps on the chain, but in also 50% of that issue is in keeping them. I think that's a really important and great note to make there. And we've seen, many ecosystems come and go over our years here within the crypto space. So great to hear your background on the different initiatives you're taking to not just gain these partners, but maintain them. As we're on the topic of partners, I think it's a great time to dive into the integration of DIA on Linea and explore a little bit more about the relevance of oracles and tooling on the network and the DIA integration. So maybe before we get into perhaps Paul's perspective here, Manuel, you gave some insights already into the importance of oracles and tooling on Linea. Can you explain or give us more background on sort of the process of bringing DIA on chain here and the significance more so in terms of DIA making its data library available for developers on Linea?
Yeah, let's start from the overall background, right? So for people that and users, maybe listeners that are here and don't know about the need of providing, a reliable Oracle services to a network, just know that it's basically one of the biggest dependencies that you need to run a network. It's like going to the restaurant. You might have the food, you might have whatever you want, but if you're not able to pay the bill, you're basically gonna kicked out. And the same thing can be related to the need of oracles. Oracles are literally, the bridge between the Linea network and everything that is on the outside world. Also, both on chain and off chain, I would say, especially, in the case of DIA, right? Guys, we have been talking for a lot as of now. You also helped us a lot by getting the oracles into Linea. In our opinion, I think that the data feeds that you guys have and especially the data library is incredibly cool. The amount of on-chain sources and on-chain sources that you're able to provide is staggering. Also the assets. If we go into the DeFi space, where is something that we are actually taking care of right now during the DeFi voyages I was telling you. Your feeds in the data library are amazing, both on the data sources side and on the price feeds. You cover pretty much everything that really we need on the most reliable sources. I honestly, as we are trying to push different type of assets such as RWA and LSDs, for example, inside this DeFi voyage, this becomes increasingly relevant. And having an oracle like Dia that is already on so many liquid staked tokens is very, very important. As just for somebody that maybe STETH is the perfect example, right? But it's so important, in my opinion, inside your data library to get a take and also such a perfect UI for our developers to get data from, that really becomes very important, especially for applications that need the fair value to be constantly updated and very reliable, of course. So there are many things that we seriously appreciate about this partnership with Dia. It's super important for us, as I was telling you. In general, I invite anybody that is willing to build, but even to use any DApp on Linea, to go over the Dia data library, because I think that it's built with a UI which is very simple to understand from anyone. The data sources, most of them are really known. I mean, just look at the checks, right? There is no need to explain everything. It's a pluggable, really plug and play solution, in my opinion, that can bring a lot of benefits instead of needing to interact with very difficult and hard to understand interfaces. So it's a whole complete set of things. Then there is all the NFT part. Honestly, I haven't really played yet with the Dia NFT data, but I know that you guys are probably one of the biggest, or if not the biggest ones, related to data feeds on NFTs. Is it correct?
Yeah, we certainly have a focus on NFT pricing as well, and definitely we can hear more from Paul on that as well. But yeah, definitely NFTs are part of the product of value stack as well.
Yeah, anyways, we really value a lot. We really value D a lot. So it's very important for us guys. And I mean, I talked about more you guys, than the actual deployment on Linea, because I think that that would be basically just boring to go over a bit the process on what we do and what we did also with Dia. You see, this Twitter space in which we're on today is one of the things that you benefit from a partnership like this. So being able to touch two different communities, being able to have focus on two products is super important. It's not just a technical deployment, it's anything that comes after that. There is somebody, I don't remember who, that published a tweet and said, the technology and the dApps themselves, are not the the reason for which users and networks use them, but rather is the presence of a good BD and a good team that is always there to pick up the phone. And I think that with Dia, this is definitely solved every time.
Love that, Emanuele. Definitely can agree on that quote. And here, so thanks so much for the shout out here to the partnership and the different products we're providing. And I really want to basically confirm so much your perspective here that we have a very similar one here. These, I guess, aligned values, looking to provide the right infrastructure and components for people who want to stay not just a week, but who value the infrastructure and value proposition, in combination with an ecosystem which appreciates these values. So that's really, I mean, that's always fun. You always expect this, but I think these spaces are also a great time to basically hear this from the people behind the teams, and it makes me even more so excited. Obviously, having received again this great overview from Declan on your technology stack and where the journey is heading for you, and as well as Emanuele, what you're seeing on the community and growth side. That's super exciting for us. So we really appreciate to be one of the many cool partners you have here in the ecosystem.
Absolutely, guys. I mean, the pleasure is all ours, really.
I absolutely echo what Paul just said. Thank you, Emanuele, for that comprehensive background. And while we're on this topic, Paul, let's stay with you here. Emanuele mentioned all the different Dia's large data library and support for different Oracle verticals like liquid stake tokens, real world assets, fair value feeds, NFTs, and so much more. Can you give some background from your perspective, Paul, as a co-founder and head of BD, on Dia's vision for providing these products across chains, and how is Dia distinguishing itself in these areas?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm gonna borrow again here what Declan you were referring to when you were bringing the analogy of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that's a really good one. I guess we see oracles as being on the lower ladder, so it's like food, water, air for an ecosystem, and that's the approach we're taking. So we believe that oracles, among other infrastructure components, RPCs, block explorers, nodes, whatnot, is something which will be needed by the developers, the builders of an ecosystem. So when we see that this vision aligns well with the ecosystem, we believe we can be of value, and we differentiate among our peers. And I think an ecosystem should have more than just us. So I think there's value in having many oracles as they come in different sizes and shapes. But we really differentiate with this, what I said, I think initially, with this perspective that ecosystems are specific, they are semi-perfectly connected, and there's value in being able to provide these ecosystems with very specific price feeds. This can be just the ability of including DEX data from these ecosystems and the given liquidity to price assets accordingly. It can cover specific assets such as LSDs. Emanuele, you were mentioning them, a huge growth driver, something where we are providing, I think, pretty comprehensive tooling and are seeing extremely exciting applications being built on top, while covering also, I guess, areas such as randomness and NFT floor prices. So we have a pretty unique, broad, as well as very specific set of data where we're trying to make these as easily accessible to a builder as possible. So this means that documentation, but also front ends, something such as our Oracle Builder, which I can really recommend to everyone to check out, which is on a couple of different test nets. So people can have a very easy lift to build whatever they have in mind without needing to ping Dylan or me and go through some approval processes. We really want to equip the people who are building exciting things. And Linea is a great place to provide that infrastructure too. So we are speaking with lots of extremely exciting projects. So it's a great place to be here.
Absolutely. I always say one of the best parts of being, working for an Oracle within this space is the chance to chat with all of these different innovative teams across the different ecosystems and different chains. And yeah, really agree with that point there, and appreciate how you shared more insights into the vision here, right? With regard to Oracle Builder, making feeds not just comprehensive, both from a broad and a granular perspective, but also very accessible and transitioning almost into this permissionless architecture for requesting data feeds. So yeah, I definitely would also encourage everybody to check out the Oracle Builder on the diadata.org site there. Yeah, so let's transition here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know that we're coming into close on the hour soon. So let's just take one last moment here to discuss what's, take a look forward here. Looking forward, what's next for the partnership between Linea and Dia? Or on either sides, are there any exciting milestones ahead on the roadmap for either of these teams that we should look forward to? I see Emanuele got kicked again. Thankful that hasn't happened to me yet as the host here. Paul, why don't we stay with you since we had you last? What's next here for this partnership, and any other exciting milestones you want to highlight?
Yeah, so here, Declan, I'm gonna quote you again here. You were referring to like feeling like home when it comes to EVM equivalents. I think I'd like to broaden that thought of overall developer experience. So we are trying to provide, in this partnership, additional tooling and potentially also common infrastructure to builders, so they really feel at home with all the different tooling they can possibly need in the journey. And our role for sure is to deploy the different components we have within the DIA stack on Linea, and we're looking forward to roll out additional ones in the coming months. And I think what Dylan already highlighted, I think Oracle Builder is a super cool tool where we'd be excited to see this on Linea, which reduces significantly the time for people to deploy very specific Oracle feeds. So I think that's kind of an absolutely new and unseen way of how to use oracles in the space. So this among a lot of interesting dApp deployments, which will be upcoming and will be announced as soon as we're live with them, are, I guess, the elements I'm most exciting about. The upcoming milestones with you folks from the Linea team.
Definitely, and want to echo that and say that exactly, looking forward to more partnerships within and on the Linea chain itself. Emanuele, let's take a look from your perspective here. Looking at the ecosystem, you mentioned all these different initiatives. What can we look forward to? And for those in the audience who are interested in getting involved, what resources would you recommend or reference them to access to really get involved with Voyager and all the exciting initiatives that Linea has going on?
Yeah, for sure, sir. So let's take it from the DIA perspective first. I mean, the biggest now, let's say, step for us, the next milestone is definitely getting people and builders to build using DIA, and use the product, test it out, use the feeds. I mean, even as test, it doesn't need to become a dev, but we are really trying to foster this this way for which we can get a lot of more people to build. Secondly, I would say that regarding the voyage, anybody can go at intract.io/Linea and test it out. We are currently at the wave 3, which is related to token swaps. So it should be something that many of the users probably in this call already do. And yeah, I think that this is a bit on what we have so far. What's probably more interesting now is really to understand, from Declan, what the overall roadmap for Linea is, just to understand better what's coming next for the network.
Absolutely. Great transition. Would love to hear from you, Declan, in terms of what's next from the product side on the Linea roadmap.
Yeah, so our focus sort of from the core network perspective is just fast, cheap transactions forever, to sort of boil it down. So we've got some really, really exciting releases coming up. Very soon, I'm talking in days, maybe a couple of weeks, we're making an upgrade to mainnet to make Linea one of the fastest, if not the fastest, L2s in the space, which is obviously going to be great for DeFi. It's going to be great for Oracle service providers as well to publish more frequent updates. We have some huge improvements on the cost side as well. Like, these are scaling solutions, and so fees need to be as cheap as they possibly can be. And we have some really exciting updates there. We're going to be implementing on sort of the core ZK side. So a couple of things, what we call proof aggregation and data compression. And I won't get into the details of those, but they're going to basically, reduce the prices of Linea to be extremely cheap. And they'll also enable us to process way more transactions than we can even imagine today. So that's why I say cheap transactions forever, because, if there's a bull market and we find some more applications and use cases and more users come into Web3, we can make sure they stay cheap. We don't have any congestion. And then the other big thing as well that we're getting ready for is something called 4844, which is a Ethereum protocol upgrade on the layer 1, but it's really relevant for rollups like Linea. It basically means that our sort of publication costs will come down. Again, what this means, for users and builders, is that the fees are just going to be, astronomically low, and that just unlocks so many more use cases. It makes DeFi, it makes all sorts of industries and verticals like completely open to new ways of building applications. And so that's something as well that we're going to be implementing very soon, latest sort of Q1 next year. And then, other than that, it's just, like I said, making sure that Linea is always as secure as can be, moving on our path towards full decentralization in a safe and gradual way. And then also, like I say, we're always staying in touch with our community, with all of the different builders and partners that are on Linea to like get feedback, and we try to keep our plans as a roadmap and sort of like core developers like extremely flexible, just listening to everyone and sort of, if there is a direction that we need to take to support the community, then we're always able to be flexible and like move with the space. So just want to emphasize that, Linea is a very collaborative team, and we spend a lot of time making sure that we get feedback. But otherwise, fast, cheap transactions forever is absolutely the goal for us in the short term.
I love that. I think that, as you highlighted, that's important from every aspect, from developers to end users. I mean, as an end user myself, in many instances, having cheap transactions just makes the experience overall so much better to test out all of the different applications on the network, right? It's not just in using one of the applications you have the benefit of paying less fees or whatnot, but it really allows you to explore and really go around and test out all of the different types of applications on the network. So great to hear that from you guys. Really excited to stay in touch. I think that this was such a thorough and comprehensive spaces for hopefully everybody in the audience to really get a better background on all of the exciting things you guys are doing from both the product side and the ecosystem side. I want to say thank you so much to the Linea team for joining us here and for all the exciting fruits that have been born in our partnership here, and so much more to come. Before I wrap things up, I just want to go around and see if there's any closing thoughts here. I know I just heard from all of you guys in terms of like looking forward, but before I close off, any closing remarks here? Paul, Emanuele, Declan, any last thoughts? If not, I will close on up.
No, I also just really want to thank you guys. Thank you, Emanuele. Thank you, Declan. Real pleasure. And again, I think it's the combination of technology and alignment of beliefs within ecosystem which can make up a great partnership. So it's extremely exciting to work with you guys and all the builders in your ecosystem. And I'm much looking forward to what's all coming up. And thank you everyone here in the audience to join in on this panel. This highly appreciated.
Thanks to you guys. Super appreciate the invite. Let's talk soon.
Excellent. Yeah, hopefully we can revisit this in like a year from today and see how far we've come. Really looking forward to just continue expanding this collaboration. As Paul said, thank you everybody in the audience who listened in today. And we will see you on the next episode of Chain in Focus. Take care, everybody. And thanks once again. Have a great rest of your days. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.